Hi, you guys. It's Coach Corey here. As you may or may not know, January is World Carnivore Month. So I'm going to release a video here this week that's going to just talk about how you can approach the Carnivore Challenge, whether or not you started at the beginning of the month, or maybe it's on your mind. You've been seeing it on social media and kind of getting curious about it. And maybe you want to start your own version of the Carnivore Challenge. So we're going to talk about all of that, kind of how you can approach that. We're going to just talk about really navigating this uncharted territory. Not a lot of people have a lot of experience going low carbohydrate and really kicking that body into ketosis. So when we finally have the opportunity to do that, there's a lot of changes going on. It's a huge adaptation that's going on in the body. So we're going to address that here in the video today. And I'm also going to give you a couple of my personal, I'm calling them like pillars of my coaching strategy that I always bring to my clients. So lucky you, you're kind of getting a little bit of a behind the curtain type view of my coaching strategy. If you're someone who is approaching the Carnivore Challenge, I think it's important to understand that this video isn't, of course, formal coaching, and any changes that you make to your diet or your nutrition strategy should be done with support, maybe from a coach, maybe from your medical team, just depending on your metabolic health and kind of where you're at right now. So always want to kind of disclaim that right there at the beginning, but let's go ahead and jump right in and talk about the Carnivore Challenge, ways to approach it, and really we're going to discuss mindset first and foremost. So here we go. Okay, so let's talk mindset first. I'm going to give you kind of two tidbits of information here that I think can kind of start to get the wheels turning and just give you a really good idea of the mindset that we want to be in, not only when we're approaching the Carnivore Challenge, but honestly, any changes that you're making to maybe your nutrition, your lifestyle. So I'm gonna kind of prep and prime the mind, or the mind game first. So let's do that right here. The two concepts or pillars that I'm gonna bring to you is number one, think on a continuum, and number two is identify your filter. And this is something that I work with, again, with all of my clients, my friends, my family, anybody who is myself, my husband, anybody who's kind of trying to make some changes in their life. So we're going to talk about thinking on a continuum first. And so full transparency, this is a precision nutrition concept. This is something that I learned in my coaching training that I did through precision nutrition. And so you may be familiar with this if you've done that kind of a coaching program before, or maybe you actually coach and you've heard of this concept. So it's not necessarily original, but it's one that I find is really important and super applicable in these scenarios. So what does thinking on a continuum mean? It really just means that we need to recognize that the world is not just black and white. It's not yes or no. You are not good or bad when it comes to your behaviors, right? We might have, certain feelings or emotions around behaviors, and that really comes back to your why and your goals. So whether you're aligning with those goals and your why or not, you might feel certain things that kind of cause you to say, like, I've been bad, or I've been, really good. And that's great. Like, yes, let's recognize that behavior. Let's kind of dig into those emotions. But when we approach nutrition, when we approach any kind of behavior change, there are shades of gray, right? We need to be kind of focused on doing the best that we can in any given moment, in this situation, at any given meal, or, whenever we're hungry, whenever it's snack time. We're not necessarily thinking about, well, what is good behavior versus what is bad behavior. Rather, we're kind of looking at all of the variables, weighing and measuring the consequences of the potential decisions that we may be making. And frankly, we want to learn how to do it quickly, because that's how we're going to keep our stress levels low. And that is a huge key in making changes to yourself, to your life, to your behavior, your nutrition strategy, or whatever it may be. So kind of weighing and measuring those consequences real quick, and then just making a good decision for yourself, making a decision in that moment, and then, learning from it. Sometimes we'll say, yeah, I'm the type of person that does X. And then we say yes to that thing, and we're like, man, that came back and hit me or bit me, so to speak. And we just have to learn from that scenario. So once we start to see in shades of gray, we get to learn from all of our experiences and just try to elevate it the next time. Just try to do a little bit better each time we're presented with a challenge, obstacle, or just a decision that we need to make. Now, the second pillar or concept we're going to cover is identify your filter. And these are the questions that you're going to be asking yourself anytime it's time to eat, whenever you're in the grocery store, even doing your shopping for the week or for the next few days. You want to identify your filter. So remember that whatever you look for, you are going to find. When you enter the grocery store, if you're asking the question, what are my main proteins? What are my animal-based protein sources? You're going to find them. You're going to look for them. Your brain is going to say, hey, let's go back to the meat section. Let's go talk to the butcher, right? The next question you may have on your filter is for keto and carnivore specifically is going to be, what's my healthy fat, right? We need to make sure that if we're completely withdrawing carbohydrate or mostly withdrawing a fuel source like that, we need to replace it with something. We need to have energy and a fuel source in some way. So just remember, protein isn't typically going to be a fuel source, and we don't need it to be. We need fat, dietary fat, or we need carbohydrates. And again, we're removing the carbs, so we got to pump up the fat. So the filter for carnivore, again, is what is my protein? And again, we're always thinking animal-based. And what is my healthy fat? So keep it simple. Now, once you start to add other foods back in your diet, or maybe you're shooting for more keto or ketovore, you know that filter might change. It's like, okay, maybe where's my couple cupped handfuls of a low glycemic index type carbohydrate like broccoli, cauliflower, cabbages, or whatever you may enjoy, whatever feels good in your body. So yes, that filter is going to look different depending on you as an individual, where you're at and what you're shooting for with your nutrition strategy. But it's also going to be different in different life scenarios, right? We have a lot of people who travel for work, and maybe carnivore is simply not accessible when work is paying for the pasta buffet. How do we approach that? And what does our filter look like there? Again, maybe with the help of a coach, someone like myself, we get to kind of design that filter for you so that you know what you're looking for, and you're just training your brain to always look for the things that align with your goals and your why. Now remember, with both of these concepts, thinking on a continuum and identifying your filter, we are never shooting for perfection. I don't shoot for perfection. I would never demand that of clients, friends, family, my husband, anything like that. That's not the goal. Talk about stress levels. So remember that we're not shooting for perfection ever. We're just kind of gathering information, running our filter, and trying to make a decision that positively benefits us in any given moment. When it comes to identifying your filter, KISS. Keep it super simple. And again, relates right back to keeping stress levels low and kind of what happens with our body chemistry when we stress out. We want to moderate that. We want to kind of control that, breathe through that decision-making process, and just keep doing the best that we can. So KISS, keep it super simple. Okay, so that's all the mindset stuff. Feel free to go back, review that information. Again, that stuff is gold, and that is what honestly people pay me for. So you're welcome. A little gift for you right there. I'm feeling real friendly. And so now we're going to really get into the meat of it. We're going to talk about this keto carnivore. I'm going to talk about the continuum first. And this is going to help you kind of decide maybe where your starting point is if you're someone who's interested or curious about carnivore or low carbohydrates strategies. So we're going to dive into that first. When you're eating ketovore, keto, or carnivore, they're all technically just ketogenic nutrition strategies. And just like thinking on a continuum, these nutrition strategies exist on a continuum of their own. And so we're going to review what those levels are, and maybe you're going to kind of identify what you want your starting point to be. And I'm going to talk about how you can make that decision in a smart way for yourself. When you're thinking about the continuum, I want you to know that sometimes it's not always the same. Sometimes my husband and I are inspired to go really strict carnivore. We eat, just beef and butter, and we enjoy our morning coffees. But we'll go just beef and butter for maybe 3-4 days straight, maybe a whole week, kind of depending on what these previous behaviors have looked like. Did we maybe treat ourselves to something sweet, maybe rice or some kind of carbohydrate that we're like, hey, let's kind of reset the system. So you don't necessarily need to choose a level and, be hardcore and just stick to that because, hey, I said this is what I was going to do. While there's absolutely integrity in that and I have a level of respect for that, with things going on in our lives, maybe holding ourselves to a really, solid standard like that, maybe that does increase stress. And you're going to hear me talk about that a lot. But it's very important to know that, hey, we need to make really clear decisions. We're doing the best we can in any given moment. And that sometimes we'll say yes to things that in other moments we simply won't say yes to. And that's okay, guys. That's the shades of gray that I'm talking about here with thinking on a continuum. So again, sometimes you'll choose to keep it strict. Sometimes you'll relax a little bit, but relaxing doesn't mean totally saying F it, okay? Making a choice just because it's better than a really bad choice doesn't make it a good choice. And again, shades of gray, guys, shades of gray. So I'm gonna present to you 4 levels of this carnivore keto continuum, mainly focused on carnivore. You'll start to be able to kind of put together, what your level is going to look like, and you'll be able to personalize it. And I think that's what's really important too, is, making it personal to you and choosing things that work for you. And then I'll say this again later, but if we're not getting the results we're looking for, then kind of move down the continuum and, keep figuring out what does feel best in the body. So this is the keto-carnivore continuum that I've identified. You're gonna see this presented in different ways, just kind of depending on who you're watching or whose work you're looking at, or, everyone kind of has their own classification, but generally speaking, we identify about 4 levels of carnivore. At a level 1, you're just enjoying all animal products, and that includes any kind of non-sugar dairy. I would highly recommend staying away from milk. There's so many carbohydrates in milk, they add up very fast. When I say non-sugar, in my mind, I'm kind of thinking, you might enjoy kefir, which is a fermented dairy product. You might enjoy like a no sugar yogurt. And if you want to sweeten it up, my recommendation would be a monk fruit extract. Just add a little bit of sweetness to it. It doesn't typically promote an insulin response, and that's really what we're going for when it comes to any sweeteners. Back to level 1, this may include a short list of vegetables. For me, it includes fermented vegetables. So kimchi, sauerkraut, pickles are a part of our relatively regular intake, a couple times a week, I would say, but definitely on a weekly basis. And then this level would also likely include coffee and or tea, if that's something that's already a part of your strategy. If not, it's you don't need to add that in there. And I would call this level 1 Ketovore, this marriage of keto, where you're clearly eating some carbohydrates, vegetables especially, and carnivore, where we're focusing on that meat-based strategy. For level 2 on the keto-carnivore continuum, you're still enjoying all of your animal products, but this is typically going to start to exclude most dairy, maybe with the exception of butter, and specifically grass-fed butter. I'm a big fan of Kerrygold. Highly recommend that you make your eggs with maybe Kerrygold ghee, if that's something you're interested in making at home. We do that every now and then. We put butter on our beef or in our ground beef. So that grass-fed butter might stay a staple even through level 3, but always personal preference, kind of depending on the response and how good it makes you feel or whatnot. And then at that level 2, maybe still coffee and tea, and we'll call this one a more relaxed carnivore. Moving right along that continuum to level 3, you're really getting ruminant meat focused. And so that just means that we're eating animal products from animals that have a ruminant or a 4-chambered stomach, the most common of which is cow. So beef, lamb, deer, elk, bison, and any game mostly that we're hunting out there would be considered in this category. Not bear. If you can get bear, that's amazing, but bear is not ruminant, but that doesn't mean that that's not allowed at this level. At level 3, you're probably going to exclude all dairy, maybe even including butter, but again, depending on the person, you're going to exclude pork and poultry. And so on the anecdotal side, I haven't seen any research to support this, but I've heard from like Michaela Peterson, if you're familiar with her, and talk about her with the next level too. But I've heard her talk about how some individuals can be sensitive to what the animal actually ate kind of living in this world where, I'm very well aware that we kind of mass produce animals at this point, and I'm not a fan of that. And we can talk about the morals and ethics on another video. But pork and poultry are being fed some interesting diets these days. I know specifically we have some chickens out there with vegan diets. Understand that birds are carnivore, actually. Really omnivore, excuse me. Birds are omnivore. Yeah, they can eat grains and things like that, but they will eat bugs. They'll eat worms off the ground, and they're pretty savage. I'm not going to get all into that. But back to our continuum here, you're probably excluding most dairy, almost all dairy, pork, and poultry, focusing highly on that ruminant meat. But maybe when that's not available, you're comfortable kind of looking at those other animal-based products. So that's going to be your level 3, and we'll call that a more strict carnivore. And now level 4 is our extreme. Again, coming back to Mikhaila Peterson, level 4 is the lion diet. It's beef and water. You're not having coffee, and really probably no coffee and tea in level 3 as well. Add that in there. But by level 4, it's beef and water. This is very strict carnivore, and it's the lion diet is what Mikhaila Peterson calls it. So that's the continuum that I've identified. And again, it's just as simple as, hey, maybe I'm not getting the results that I'm looking for at a level 1, and I've been doing this for a couple of weeks. Let's scoot down and start to go a little closer to that level 2. We start to really cut out any kind of veggie, and maybe even fermented vegetables aren't on the list at that point. Just give the body a break from that kind of a thing. Focus up on what level 2 includes. And, maybe you start to get those results there and it's going great for a few weeks and you plateau, but you're motivated to scoot down that continuum a little more. So that's really how you would troubleshoot it. Just kind of continuing to cut out any kind of non-animal product or even processed animal products like the dairy out of your nutrition strategy. Stay where you're at for at least a week, but I would say probably 2, unless you're really having a response or a reaction to something. And then you can kind of make that decision if you want to stay where you're at or if you want to scoot down that continuum a little bit more. So in terms of approaching your carnivore challenge, we're going to detour from the continuum and all that really quickly. What you really want to figure out for yourself, if you're an abstainer or a moderator, are you able to just kind of make big changes really quickly, commit to it, and just troubleshoot on the fly? You're probably an abstainer. You just want to kind of cut the crap, right? Cut the carbs. You might just approach your carnivore challenge as a 30, 60, 90 or more day challenge where you set that time for yourself. And then as you approach the end of whatever that time frame is, kind of reviewing how it's going, how you're feeling. Are you motivated to keep it going? Or maybe you're using the diet as an elimination strategy and you're going to start to add things back in, kind of once you hit whatever your benchmark is, 30, 60, 90 days, whatever you decide for yourself. So that'd be kind of like the just go for it, cold turkey, the abstainer method of entering that carnivore challenge. And honestly, that works really well for some people. I loved that. I loved doing that and just like pressing that reset button. And I find that kind of easier for myself because if I give myself the little bits of carbs here and there, then I'm going to have little bits of carbs here and there, more and more, right? And so I want to avoid that best I can. So abstaining works for me. I recognize that that's just simply not where everybody's going to be at. So moderating and making these really small changes to your behavior, right? Over time, that's going to work really well for some people too. And honestly, it is one of my specialties. It's something that I coach with. Almost anyone who I bring on board is likely going to be a moderator because they need the support. They need that accountability buddy, someone who's kind of reading and studying all about it, can bring them that information really clearly. And I always say, like, my job is just to bring you the education. You decide, you tell me what direction we're going, and I support you. And, we troubleshoot. I challenge you, of course, on some of those decisions. But that's very much a big part of what I do is helping moderators make these small changes, keep stress levels a little bit lower than the abstainer, and just kind of allow for like this concept of a singular focus where we're just working on making sure that we're sourcing all of our proteins from animal sources first. And then once we master that, we'll kind of move on to whatever that next skill is. And again, that's directly from precision nutrition. These small changes over time equal lifestyle changes that are sustainable. There's longevity there. And so that's what's going to be really valuable to the moderator and that style of making changes. All right, now we're talking about managing the effects of low carbohydrate, keto, or carnivore style of eating. And everybody, of course, is on their own healing journey. So this is very generalized. Some observations that I've made, just in myself, my friends, family, and clients to kind of bring you some information on how you can manage this adaptation. It's huge and it can be fun. And you really have to approach it with that mindset of like, I'm about to learn a lot about myself, what my body is really doing, and very much revealing to yourself a lot about your underlying metabolic health. So it can be a struggle. Yeah, it's an adaptation. This can be a struggle. There's challenges and obstacles that come with this. We've all heard of keto flu and dealing with carbohydrate withdrawal. So yeah, we're going to touch on that too. And so what I want to lead this section off with is you have to push through those first 2 weeks because you are going to experience withdrawal symptoms and maybe gut issues. Some people experience heartburn and things like that as your body adjusts to breaking down a meat-based nutrition strategy and also all of that dietary fat. How many of us were eating, a higher carbohydrate, a lower fat intake, and then we kind of had to let our body learn how to break down that dietary fat and use it and, absorb it and all of that good stuff. So getting into that. But what we really need to do with low carb, carnivore, and keto is push through that first 2 weeks. Week 1 it's gonna be a big change. And then week 2, you're probably gonna experience that withdrawal and maybe even sooner for anywhere from 3 to 5 days, depending on where you're at. And then once you get through there, we kind of come into this clearing. And one of the first things that we notice generally, and again, everybody's different, but generally one of the first things we experience is this like mental clarity. And it's like a drug, except it's the opposite of that. You're getting clean, you're getting clear, and your brain is gonna start to use ketones for energy along with whatever glucose the body feels that it needs to produce for you. So carbs are non-essential. I'll touch on that real quick. And the body will make sugar when it needs to, but the brain absolutely loves to use ketones for energy. And ketone is really just that functional unit. When you're in ketosis, the body produces ketones and ketone bodies for energy, sends them around the body, and the brain prefers them. So we experience this insane mental clarity. And sometimes that's enough for the individual just be like, how do I keep this going? Like, I never want this to stop. And maybe that becomes your motivation to continue strong with whatever's your version of keto and carnivore. So the best way that you can manage any symptoms or kind of side effects of what you're feeling of switching over to that fat adapted state or being in ketosis is truly to let it happen. And that's hard to say because I wish there was some kind of like something I could give you to say like, hey, this is gonna completely relieve you of these symptoms. And that's just not the case. We're truly moving in the other direction of using, supplements, pills, procedures, right? You're addressing your nutrition strategy, your lifestyle behaviors, right? And so, acknowledge yourself for that and recognize that we just kind of have to let it go. Some people are going to experience heartburn, but I'm going to recommend that you do not use antacids. Your body is a finely tuned machine, especially when it's working well, when it's healthy, and as it gets healthy, it's just more and more finely tuned, let's say. So pH throughout the body, the alkalinity or the acidity in the body is very much regulated. And what we don't want to do is use something like Pepto-Bismol or Tums or something like that to calm your heartburn. Unfortunately, you kind of just have to be with that. You have to feel that sensation and recognize that that's a result of a previous nutrition strategy or behaviors that were simply not working for you. And now the body is saying, hey, I get to heal this. You're going to feel this, but you're on that path towards healing and feeling better. And so that's really what you need to You just need to have that motivate you. You need to let that motivate you in those moments. So no antacids, don't do any of that stuff, let it go. For headaches and brain fog, this is actually the only area where I'm gonna suggest a supplement, but you're gonna wanna supplement this really throughout being keto. It's salts. You're gonna need to supplement salts. We're kind of losing these carbohydrate stores from the muscles, from eating carbohydrates. Your body chemistry, like I said, is gonna change. And so we're not holding on to as much water. We just have to regulate electrolytes, especially in the transition from becoming fat, from going from sugar adaptation to the fat adaptation. So kind of getting into ketosis. I recommend Element. It's just capital LMNT. 2 or 3 of those a day would be a good place to start. If you're ever feeling this like intense dip in energy, it's likely not that you don't have fuel. You're probably not necessarily hungry. It's really the electrolytes, okay? They're critical for muscle function, for digestion, just helping out all over. I find that it kind of clears my brain fog when I get into those moments. So you need salt, supplement it, and salt your foods to taste. We do all different kinds of salt, and this is like, when it comes to cooking in carnivore, you can kind of only get so creative, especially depending on what level you're at. Those first couple levels, you might be using spices and herbs and things like that. And the last 2, you're certainly not dipping into any of that stuff. But salt is still definitely there for you across all 4 levels of what I've identified as that keto-carnivore continuum. And so you want to look for mined salts like Pink Himalayan. Redmond Real is another really great brand, and I can link this stuff below. And then sea salt is a good way to go. Falk salt, I think it's Falk salt, and if I'm wrong, I'll put a little thing over my shoulder here. But they do these awesome flakes that we'll typically kind of finish our steaks with. We'll throw a tab of butter on there with some of that flaky salt. Highly recommended. And then lastly, let's address carb withdrawal. Yeah, this is something that you are going to feel. And it can literally just feel like you're getting the flu, headaches, body chills. You guys, sugar is so addictive. If you don't experience this, that's amazing, but likely you will. So just be prepared for it. And again, 2-week push through, just push through those first 2 weeks, get it over with. I experienced night sweats, headaches. The first time that I did this transition last year when we were getting into it, I think I was not feeling very lethargic, really fatigued for a good 4 or 5 days. My husband, on the other hand, he kind of went through it in 2 or 3 days. Lucky him. So yeah, it's just different for everybody. So know that you're gonna feel that, and just keep pushing through, stay hydrated. And honestly, in that phase, I recommend being more strict, cutting carbs, cutting veggies and things like that out, and really going for eggs, beef, and butter, honestly, would be really good. Maybe, keep your coffee in there, because you don't want to go through caffeine and carb withdrawal at the same time, and that would suck. So, make smart decisions, but really push through that. And once you're over that hump, you're golden, you're good to go. You just gotta push through. So this next one, we're gonna talk about poop. I always joke, but I'm also serious when I say you really can't talk about nutrition without talking about your poop a little bit. So you're withdrawing fiber that typically comes along with carbohydrates. You're withdrawing all of that carbohydrate. Just know that the volume of your bowel movement is absolutely going to decrease. You might have days where you don't poop, and that's okay. That's just giving your gut a little bit of a break in a very healthy way, and allowing for some healing to happen down there as well. So again, kind of push through that and that phase, and know that that's normal and okay. And then, ideally, hopefully, kind of depending on the state of our body and gut, you're kind of going to get to this point where it's quite comfortable and honestly satisfying to have your bowel movement. Okay, so the last part of this video that I'm going to cover here is just when and how much to eat. When you start your keto or ketovore or carnivore journey, again, we're completely changing how the body works. You have to understand that dietary fat is so much more dense and efficient at providing energy to you versus a carbohydrate-based nutrition strategy that you might go through times where you're just simply not hungry. You had a big steak for dinner last night and you're not hungry till maybe 1 or 2 in the afternoon that following day. That is completely normal. So what I would recommend is to try to not be attached to like, I need a breakfast, I need a lunch, I need a dinner, and I always eat at this time, right? You're gonna have to let go of some of those things because you simply will find that you're so satiated, you're so satisfied from the protein and fat heavy meals that you're eating that it's likely you're gonna go down to maybe 1 meal a day for a couple of days, which you don't want to hang out there. We need more food than that, but have lots of patience in this process, patience with the adaptation. So you may come down to OMAD, 1 meal a day for a little while, maybe even every other day. It kind of looks like that 1 meal a day. But as your body adapts, you'll kind of start to get that appetite back, so to speak, as your body becomes more used to what you're giving it, and you'll be able to at least eat twice a day. From my experience and kind of anecdotally as well, it sounds like a lot of carnivores and ketovores are eating about twice a day. You'll decide when you break that fast, and then when again you have that dinner. And honestly, it often looks like a bit of an intermittent fast, which just kind of contributes to the efficiency of this nutrition strategy. You'll find that you're not distracted with what am I eating next, right? And this has been me, this was me. I'm sitting here eating breakfast like, ooh, I wonder what I can eat for lunch today. I'm like already thinking about my next meal and I'm not even done clearing my plate. That's how unsatisfying those kind of carbohydrate full meals were for me personally. And so you might experience that a little bit yourself. So what I want to encourage you to do is just listen to your hunger cues. And this might be hard at first, but again, as the system gets clean, as you adapt to this style of eating, you'll find that it becomes easier and easier to recognize your hunger cues, when you really need something to eat, when you're actually full and just done, and be okay with, leaving a little bit of food on your plate. And you'll learn, hey, I can eat about this much at one time. And if I had a really hard workout that day, or, a couple days in a row, you'll need a little bit more. So adjust that. Don't be attached to any certain amount and again, or times of day when you're eating. Just go with that flow and listen to the body, listen to the hunger cues. Now, I am going to touch on macro ratios a little bit. I recognize that I probably have some CrossFitters out there, or just individuals who have that experience. I identify with the CrossFitters, that's all. I'm like, yeah, what are the macros on this, right? So we want to know that. So honestly, a typical macro ratio for, let's talk carnivore and keto, it's really going to be about 70% of your intake coming from dietary fat and 30% coming from protein. That might sound like a really low amount of protein to some of you. My next video is going to be on the benefits of being in ketosis and ketones. So stay tuned. But what I will kind of what I'll share with you is that being in ketosis is kind of this naturally muscle sparing state where even if you get very, very hungry and you're looking around, you're running your filter and you can't get what you want. So you're like, okay, I'm going to fast. That's okay. It's a decision that you can make when the body is in ketosis. It is muscle sparing. Your body will not break down muscle if you're not quite getting enough of what you need. So just really cool information to have. So 30% of your intake coming from protein. Maybe women, as we're getting older, I'm going to say maybe 45 older, if you're approaching menopause or maybe you're in menopause, you might bump that up to 40%. If you're an athlete, you might bump that up to 40%, mainly because you're comfortable eating that much. And our muscles and our body, we need protein. But know that with the dietary fat intake that you're getting, with that 30 to 40% protein and the rest of it coming from your dietary fat, you have all of the components and you're going to balance out the hormones. You have everything that you need to build muscle on this nutrition strategy. And a lot of individuals will find that they build muscle on this nutrition strategy without really trying, just by giving the body those components and being in ketosis. So again, just super, super cool there. So 70-30 is good. 60-40 is fine, fat to protein ratio. And then In any keto strategy, 10% or less is coming from carbohydrates. And I'll encourage you to go as low as you can, because I know that carbohydrates can just happen, right? Eating just a cheeseburger with no ketchup on the side can be a huge adaptation for someone and a deterrent. So, use some condiments sparingly, in moderation, and be aware of what that sweetener is, where it's coming from, how much, all of that good stuff, right? Read the labels. But you can kind of use those things as a tool to transition over to eating more meat based and kind of trying to work those things out of your regular intakes. So just wanted to touch on macros for you. Okay, folks, so again, I want you to keep all of this super simple. I feel like this video has already gone over time, so if you've made it this far, thank you so much. If you have any questions about what I've presented here, or even personal questions, DM me on Instagram at Contrarian Nutrition. You can also find my personal account. That's totally fine. DM me however you feel the most comfortable. Post some questions and comments down below. Please feel free to like and share this video with anyone who you know who is carny curious, or maybe just looking into keto and carnivore style of eating. As I mentioned earlier, next week's video is going to be about just the benefits of being in ketosis and literally having ketones in your system. We're not going to get super technical. Again, I try to keep it as simple as possible. So looking forward to bringing you that information, and I hope to see you then.